So let's take a few minutes in this lesson and talk about applying finishes to our cabinets. The best or highest quality finish you could apply would be through spraying. So you can brush on some finish coats, either say polyurethane or lacquer, but you're going to get your best results or the most factory finish looking results if you use some type of spray system. So a few years ago, actually, before I built my first set of kitchen cabinets, I went out and spent around $400 or $500 and bought a Fuji Mini-Mite turbine system. And it retails for about $500. It's a lot of money to spend, but I justified it by, hey, I'm building a whole set of kitchen cabinets here. I'm saving thousands of dollars, and I use some of that savings to opt to buy some better equipment. And then I've since used this spray system for a bunch of other projects. Multiple kitchens, I've used it to spray my built-ins, all that stuff. It's a nice system to have. If you don't want to spend that kind of money on a Fuji system, there are Graco models, there are some other alternative options for getting some decent spray gear. But the Fuji Mini-Mite system, I really recommend if you want to pop for it. So what are we spraying? For a painted cabinet, say a white finish or some kind of a color tinted finish, we need to put on a primer. And I use this bin primer, and it is a shellac-based primer. And what you could do is you can thin this with a little bit of denatured alcohol. You'll need denatured alcohol to clean this, whether your gun or whatever else. I believe you can apply this with a brush or a roller if you want to. So what I would do is I put some shellac primer in here, added a little denatured alcohol, and then I went ahead and sprayed it. And I'll show you what that looks like. We set up a little spray shop in our garage, but you can do this outside your home. You don't want to spray this type of paint, either shellac or the lacquer, in your house. Either in the garage, very well ventilated space. You can't do this in your basement. You can do some staining and some polyurethaning and that sort of thing in your house, but you cannot spray this stuff. It's very noxious stuff. So what we'll do is we'll load it up, we'll have a respirator on, and what we're going to do is we're going to make some very even, straight passes on it. So what you don't want to do is, and if you're looking at the cabinet, you don't want to do one of this type of motion where you're kind of making a curve. You want to start from one end, say the cabinet's here, and you want to start it, bring it across the cabinet, and then stop it or keep going past the cabinet in straight lines, okay? You're almost like Daniel-san in Karate Kid, right? Like paint fence, right? It's that sort of deal. You don't want to be doing one of these because you end up getting way more paint in the middle where the sprayer hits and less on the side. You definitely want to make nice, even, square passes, all right? So the shellac primer dries pretty quickly, and then you can go back and go over it with some steel wool, wipe it down or blow it out with some air, and then you can switch to lacquer. So lacquer is very, very toxic stuff. It smells. There's a good amount of VOC. Even this, I think this is a lower VOC lacquer. It's still very nasty stuff. So when I was spraying it, I ended up wearing one of those like full body suits because I just didn't want to ruin my clothes. You end up getting a lot of overspray regardless of what system you use, where any spray that misses your project goes into the air, that's overspray. So this lacquer, what we're going to do is we mix it about 10% with lacquer thinner. So we cleaned our gun, our brushes, or whatever with the shellac, with denatured alcohol, and we thinned it out with denatured alcohol. For lacquer, you're going to do that same thing just with lacquer thinner. So you can get lacquer thinner anywhere you want. This particular type of lacquer is white and it's in satin. I recommend you use a satin finish, not a high gloss or a semi-gloss. A satin, which is essentially an eggshell. You don't want to use flat either. Satin is ideal for your cabinetry or woodworking projects as a general rule of thumb. Unless you're going for some very high gloss European look, I would stick with satin. So what you're going to do is you're going to stir this up, pour it into your cup, and then add about 10% of lacquer thinner, again to thin it out for better spraying. And then you're going to apply it again in even coats, and you're not going to do one of these things with it, right? You're going to use a respirator, you're going to spray it in a well-ventilated space, and then you're going to clean all your gear, your spray nozzles, and all that stuff with lacquer thinner. The nice part about this particular product, and this is what I use, this is Valspar Valtech, and it's premium pre-catalyzed lacquer. And it hardens to a nice finish. You don't need to go over the white, if you're using this particular product anyway, with a clear coat. Once you spray the white on there and it hardens to that candy shell, whatever it is, you're done. You just wait for that paint to cure overnight, and then you can go in and finish your cabinets or hang them up. You want to do 3 or 4 coats of this stuff. You could do 1 or 2 coats of the shellac primer till there's enough coverage, and then you're going to do 2, 3, or 4 coats of this lacquer. You want to avoid building it up too thick in one pass. You want to practice on the back of cabinets or some plywood to make sure your spray pattern is nice and even and it's getting the results you want to get. You need to use the right tip for lacquer. They have most sprayers, whether you're using a sprayer from Lowe's for like car work and a compressor, tips correspond to the viscosity of the fluid you're spraying. So the smaller tip for very thin, runny fluids, and very wide, more open tips for very thicker, more viscous paints. So a latex paint, which you wouldn't really spray in this gun, would require a much bigger tip. So this tip, I think, is like 1.3 or 1.4, I think that's millimeters, and it's designed for this thin type lacquer or shellac spraying. Yeah, again, it's nice. You don't have to go back and recoat them with a clear coat. When we go and do our stain cabinets, I'm going to switch to a clear-based clear-based lacquer. So there won't be any priming in that. And what we'll do for a stain cabinet is we'll stain it. We'll let the stain set up overnight, let's say, depending on how many coats or applications of stain you have. Wipe off the excess, and then I'll come back and do this clear coat. I'm going to clear coat right over the stain. And the clear coat, again, satin finish. It's exactly the same as the white. You want to thin it in your gun with about 10% of lacquer thinner. That's per the recommendation of the paint shop pros I interface with on this. This particular type of lacquer, this Valspar, I really liked it. It worked great. You need to get this stuff at a specialty cabinet shop. This is not something you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. Maybe they can order it for you, but look around your area for some professional cabinet shops or professional paint shops, and they'll carry these more sort of exotic application products. But a couple things we don't want to use is latex paint. Latex paint is not great for cabinets, woodworking that gets a lot of hands and touching on them. They're great for walls and ceilings, for molding, for trim, not so great for cabinet work. If you paint something with latex and you end up putting books on them or some trinkets over time, sometimes the paint can not adhere right. It doesn't really level well in cabinets. It'll look like latex paint. You want to look like you bought the piece, or you want to look like you had it professionally painted. So we discussed spraying. So that's the best option is putting on a few coats of primer, spraying primer, then spraying your finished coats, whether that's lacquer or something else. If you don't want to spray lacquer and you want to still get a more professional look, but you don't want to invest money in a good gun, you don't want to deal with having to work with lacquer, the other option you could do is maybe get some shaker cans of something like this type of primer or any other primer, and just spray on your primer that way, and then you can brush on a couple coats of a decent quality finish paint. So yes, you can finish your projects with brush-on paint. And why I would do that if I were to choose that option would be I want to integrate my cabinetry with the rest of the room's trim. And so if you're building cabinets that have trim that tie into the ceiling or the walls, how do you spray lacquer on that stuff? What do you do in those situations? Well, what I do is I'll still spray on 2 coats of my shellac primer. I'll install the cabinets and I'll get them all in, get the trim up, and then I'll go back with a high quality cabinet paint that's designed to be brushed on and still look good. So that particular product, there's a couple different versions, a couple different brands. Sherwin-Williams, it's Pro Classic. So Sherwin-Williams Pro Classic, you can get that in white. There are waterborne versions and oil versions of that. The waterborne version, that's not latex, but it is still an enamel paint, so it builds up almost like nail polish, like a thick enamel, and it provides more protection, more durability than regular old waterborne latex paint. So look for Sherwin-Williams Pro Classic. The other option you have is Benjamin Moore's Satin and Pervo. Satin and Pervo is what we used in my previous kitchen, and it came out great. So again, spray it for the first 2 priming coats if you can, either with a gun or spray cans or something. Install your cabinets, get your trim installed, and then you can paint the whole room in Sherwin-Williams Pro Classic or Benjamin Moore Satin and Pervo. That's what it's designed to do. And again, those aren't latex paints, those are nice. So again, the best option would be to spray on 4 coats, 2 coats of primer, 2 or 3 coats of your finished lacquer paint. The next best option is to spray on your primer and then to brush on your paint with a high quality enamel. The other thing you could do if you really don't want to spray any of them, and then what I'd recommend you do is try to use, again, like a shellac-based primer and brush those on, and then go to one of those enamel-based paints and brush those on. The big downside to brushing versus spraying is when you just get brush marks eventually. And over 4 or 5 coats between primer and finish coat, you just end up getting just too many brush marks, and it could look like a really more of a homemade project. And we want it to look, we want it to fool people. That's the objective, is that you want the finished coat to be smooth, to be durable, to hold up to what you're going to do with it on a day-to-day basis. And we want it to look really attractive. And I've seen some projects where people just paint 4 or 5 coats of brush-on paint or latex paint. Sometimes it comes out great, but sometimes it doesn't. So I want to put you in a position where you're going to have a product and a finished work that you can be really proud of. So consider buying one of these guns. I will have links to these products, of course, in the lesson notes. And if you have any questions, you can either post a comment or shoot me an email.